Attention, have your seats, and become mute. I first off want to say thank Brianna, that was awesome, and I totally related to everything she said, and I was obsessed with her silver shoes. Just going to say that. So next we have Emilie Boillat, and she's going to be talking on control, which she's not control. She's going to be talking on classification. So that's her passion, and I think that's awesome. Go ahead.
Is the mic working? No. I can just shout. Is that okay? I might get tired. Wow, that thing would need a manual, definitely. Who volunteers to write it? Okay, cool. Well, welcome everyone. I like organizing things, so I thought I'd talk to you about controlled vocabularies. And the main title of my talk is Whatchamacallit. Why? Well, this is Greg's Twitter feed. Is Greg here?
He's here.
Hi, Greg.
Hi.
I didn't get to see you yet, but hi. So I picked your feed because you were saying nice things about the conference. You were saying great talks lined up, so thank you. That's encouraging. Well, it's actually not my point. My point is, well, what if I wanted to write a manual for, some Twitter user, and I wanted to talk about this thing here. Can you see it? Yeah. So how would I refer to it? I might say, it's a username. It's Greg's username on Twitter, and some more like marketing type guy might tell me, no, look, it's a Twitter handle. That's Greg's Twitter handle. And some, developer interested in Twitter APIs might say, no, it's an object entity, So you get the whatchamacallit problem. And that's one of the situations where we need controlled vocabularies to get a shared terminology so we understand each other. And, well, in order to understand documents, well, you need to find them first, so you need to find the information. And this is also one great way where controlled vocabularies can help you, retrieval. Before you can find the information, somebody needs to capture it in some way. So this is where controlled vocabularies can help you with indexing content. So this is what controlled vocabularies are for. What are they? For example, these are some examples. You probably all know the free tagging system. So maybe you put your photos up on Flickr, and you put some tags in there. You just put, any word that kind of come to mind that describe that content well. Well, this is not controlled at all. A slightly more controlled system is where you have labels, so a list of labels, where you can pick from a list. You're not allowed to put any expression, any name there that you like, but you have to pick. A system a vocabulary that gives you slightly more control is a glossary, because it gives you a definition of each term. And then if you want to make this, to give even more context, you can define relationships between terms. So say how they relate to each other. For this, you can make a thesaurus. Thesauri are great things. They're quite flexible. One of the problems is that they're sometimes not formal enough. In this case, you can, if your need is a more formal system, you can use a taxonomy. Taxonomies are not very flexible, but they're quite formal. So computers are great at inferring things from them. And if you want the best of both worlds, you can use an ontology. This is going to be beyond the scope of this half hour. So today I'm going to focus on lists of labels, glossaries, thesauri, and taxonomies. I'm going to give you a little overview of what they are, how you can make one, what it's useful for, And it's obviously, as in anything, you know, these definitions are, they depend on who you ask. My definitions here are, well, they're going to be useful if you talk to people in the software world. If you talk to a librarian, they might have slightly different understanding of what these terms mean, but you know, the Whatchamacallit problem is everywhere. All right, so let's start with labels, just plain list of labels. Here's an example from Stack Overflow. You can categorize things on your questions on Stack Overflow with some labels. I call them labels, not tags, because there is some degree of control on Stack Overflow. So this is what labels look like, basically, just a collection of terms. Here's the degree of control that there is on Stack Overflow. So these labels, they are curated. They can be curated by some editor, some tech writer, but on Stack Overflow they're curated by the community. And how they do this is by basically putting warning signs. This is what happened when I tried to classify my question with API. They told me, don't use this tag. We don't want that one. So it's a bit, Stack Overflow is a bit of a hybrid between a free tagging system and a controlled vocabulary where you have some curator in the background that says which labels you can use and which not. So, you know, what is this useful for? Why should we restrict the amount of tags that people can use to describe their content? Well, a list of labels is useful when you have some content that comes in all formats and shapes. You might have some videos, some courses, some documents, some whatever, and you want to allow your users to browse it by topic. So this is one thing where it comes in very handy. Also, you can use it for more precise searching and browsing, because if you have a free list of, well, basically people can use any tag they want, that doesn't bring you much value added compared to just a full text search with a search engine. If you have a limited list of tags, then if you look for something on the topic Apple, for example, you know that what you're going to get is content that's really relevant to the topic Apple. Whereas if you look for it, you know, if you do a full text search, it's just going to be anything that has any document that has the word Apple in it, and not necessarily the most relevant ones. It's also useful for disambiguation, because if I look for Apple, I will find content, you know, in a, say, full text search, or using it on a site that uses free tags. I will find some things on Apple computers, some things on fruit. Whereas if I have some labels, I can do some disambiguation. I can say, you know, like the categories on Wikipedia? You can say Apple and then in parentheses fruit, or Apple in parentheses brand, and then the content that you get is much more precise. All right, this is what it might look like. You can do it in a simple spreadsheet, on paper cards, in a text editor. How do you come up with this list of labels about your domain, which I assume is some software product? You look at the user interface, look at which labels are used there. You can look at lists of features, user stories, test cases, etc. You can use it. You can also look at site search analytics to see which terms your users are looking for. What is the vocabulary they're using? You can analyze the content you already have and see which topics your content is on. You can also look at existing vocabularies. By all means, go look at your competitors. What words are they using? This is one of my attempts to create a list of labels with, using lots of, paper cutting. This is content analysis, by the way. I just printed out a list of all the content we had. which was totally disorganized, and then tried to come up with good labels to describe it. Right, moving on next to the glossary. This is what a glossary might look like. I'm going to stick to the Twitter examples. So Twitter has a very nice glossary here that's published. This is what a glossary might look like. You have some terms, and then you have some definitions next to them that give the context. What are they good for? Well, consistency. I'm sure you've all had that problem where, one tech writer uses one term, another one uses a different term, and then your user interface designer uses yet another term. So if you have a glossary, you have a place to look up what the terms actually mean that you use to describe your software product. Also for reference, internal reference, but also for your users if you decide to publish your glossary like Twitter does. And you can use it to provide context help. So, for example, Stack Overflow, when you look up a label, they will give you, that's probably, can you see that? It's not very well, huh? Well, too bad. I hope the slides are going to be online afterwards if you want to look at the, I'll make sure they're online if you want to look at the examples in more detail. All right, so here, basically, what you would see if there was a bit more contrast was each label has a definition. So when you're picking a label to index your content, you actually get more information about what that label really means in the context of the Stack Overflow site. Right, this is how I would go about doing this in a spreadsheet, just 2 columns, terms, definitions, easy. If you want, you could also include screenshots, which is really nice. I love illustrated glossaries, but they're hard work to maintain, obviously. You could also do this in a wiki. If your development team is using, say, Confluence, for example, it's a good idea to use the same tool that people always go to for reference anyway, because that's the biggest danger for the glossary is that it's somewhere a little bit out of reach. It takes some effort to open it, and it loses its reference value if people don't actually look at it and use it. So make sure it's in a place where people go to often. To come up with some definitions, look at your existing documentation, especially the concept topics. Look at training materials, marketing materials, and wherever you're missing some definitions, do interviews with some subject matter experts. Now let's move on to a basic form of thesaurus. You've probably seen some already. Do any of you use thesaurus.com? I love this site, it's great. So this is just a basic thesaurus. It gives you a term and then all the synonyms for that term, and it gives you antonyms too. I think antonyms are less relevant in the context of software documentation, but synonyms are really important. You'll see why in a moment. So this is what your basic thesaurus might look like. You're starting to see some relationships between the terms there. So basically what we're saying is this is one term, this is a different one, but it's equivalent. It means the same thing for the purposes of our domain, which is this software product we want to document. Wow, lights! Wonderful, let there be light. Thank you. Now I can't see you anymore because I've got the light on. No, it's not that bad. All right. Oh, even better! Wow, wonderful. Let me come in the middle. Wow, wonderful. Yeah, it's making it even hotter, but yeah, you don't see that. All right, so an example of a basic thesaurus is Stack Overflow. Again, I'm taking a lot of examples from there because since they do their curation, bless you. Since they do their curation by the community, you can actually see the back end of it, which is really nice. So you can see how, for example, .bat is marked as equivalent for a batch file. So what is a basic thesaurus useful for? First of all, you can use it to together with your search engine to increase the set of results that users get when they search for something. So you can have a little text file there that says, this is a list of terms, and these are the synonyms for each of these terms. And when your search engine sees, okay, the user is searching for term A, and that's synonym with B, well, I'll give all the documents that contain either A or B. It also helps to improve consistency, especially if you define a preferred term. So you can have a very basic thesaurus where you just mark terms as synonyms, but you can also have one where, like this, you say, you see this, you say, this is the preferred term, and then these are variant terms. So they're also okay, but when we write text for our interface, when we write text for our manuals, we want to use that preferred term. This is the one we want to use. All right, how do you go about doing this? Well, as I just shown in an Excel sheet, that's fine. At this point, you might want to start working with a database. Also, how do you go about finding synonyms? Well, the most important thing here is to run interviews with as diverse people as possible. So talk to your users, your project owners, your developers, your salespeople, and they will make sure that you get, that way you can make sure that you get all the synonyms that people might want to use for a specific term. All right, here, one word again at this point about disambiguation. If you haven't done it with your list of terms, when you want to draw a basic thesaurus, this is the point where you should really be careful about disambiguation, because otherwise you'll end up with situations where you say, for example, client is the same thing as customer, and then when people look for customer, they'll get some content on computer clients, which you don't want that to happen. So make sure you disambiguate your terms properly before you set synonyms for them. Right, and again, another note, equivalency, when you're talking about the thesaurus for a very specific domain, like a software product, it doesn't need to mean the same thing as a synonym in the sense of the dictionary sense of synonym. For example, here I've done something for Twitter vocabulary to talk about Twitter, and I've set follow as a synonym for unfollow, because if people are looking for content on following or unfollowing, they're going to go to the same place. For my purposes of my Twitter user manual, it's an equivalent term. Right, now moving on to a full-fledged thesaurus. So what can you add to your thesaurus to make it more powerful? And here a word of caution, you're making it more powerful but more complicated as well. So as with everything, every tool that you might want to use, think about how you're going to use this and if it makes sense to go into that level of complexity. If you want to stick to a list of terms, that's fine. If you need a full-fledged thesaurus, that's great, but it's going to be more work to create and maintain too. Makes sense, right? So here is an example of full-fledged thesaurus. That one's called powerthesaurus.org. It's also great to look up synonym words. What it gives you is not just synonyms, but it also gives you broader terms, narrower terms, and just plainly related terms. So here we're really seeing how we're starting to really map the relationships between those terms and say pretty precisely how they're related to other terms. Right. What you can see here is that you have some broader terms, you have some narrower terms, you still have your synonyms in there, and you also have lines that kind of go across a bit widely. These are related terms. So basically what it says, this relationship says, it's just these two terms have something to do with each other. If you're interested in topic A, you might be interested in topic B, but they're not necessarily in some form of hierarchical relationship. Right, this is just a different way of presenting a thesaurus. This is the page it's the European Union thesaurus. It's the page on the word software, it uses the technical lingo for thesauri. So the technical abbreviations, UF means used for. It's basically the same thing as equivalent term or synonym. Then below you can see broader term, narrower term. Here you can see that they set, for example, browser as a related term for software. So, I mean, in my opinion, I would have put it as a narrower term, because in my mind, a browser is a kind of software application. But it really shows that depending on your domain, depending on your application, this is not, the Eurovoc is not in any way like a specialized IT thesaurus. So for their purposes, they want to define it as a related term. That's fine. It's I think that's a good example of how a thesaurus can be. It's very flexible, but it's not a science. It's really more of an art. All right. So what can you use this complicated construct for then? Well, what it's really useful for is finding topics. So once you have a lot of topics, if you place them in a hierarchy, it makes it much easier for people to find these topics. So either people indexing the content or users looking for content. So you can use it as a base for your navigation on your site where the help content is, for example. What it also allows you to do is present some related topics. So if people are looking at a topic page and they want, I think I have an example here, yes. So this is Stack Overflow again, and you can see this is the page about the Java topic, and they give you some synonyms, and they also tell you, well, if you're interested in Java, you might also be interested in Android, for example. What it's also useful for in a very basic way is giving you an overview of topics and an overview of the domain that you're describing. If you're new to a software product, you don't know yet, you don't know what all that software can do. So if people can see your hierarchy of topics, it gives you already a bit of an idea of what you can find there. All right. This is one of the projects I worked on, where we used a basic two-level thesaurus to organize our content by topic. Right, so how do you come up with a full-fledged thesaurus like this? Here you can still use a spreadsheet, but only if each of your term only has one parent term. So each term is only allowed one broader term. If you want to allow several broader terms, that's fine, but it won't work well in a spreadsheet. I've tried it, believe me, it's just a mess. So here, if you want to allow what we call polyhierarchy, you would need some subject cards, or either in some custom database solution, or there are very many good thesaurus management software out there. At this point, you might also want to look into the SCOS standard, which is a W3C standard. It stands for Simple Knowledge Organization System. Got it. That's basically a standard for thesauri, so you might want to look at that to ensure that it's compatible with systems you might want to use in the future. How do you come up with a full thesaurus? One really, really useful exercise is card sorting. I don't know if some of you have done that before. It's something designers are very fond of. You give your users or your developers a list of terms. You don't need to give them all the terms, but each term on one card, and you ask them to sort them, to group them in any way that they think makes sense. And that gives you a very good idea of the mental model that people have, of how they think that these terms relate to each other, because everybody has a bit of a different a different idea, especially somebody who's already an expert might have a very different way of grouping those subjects than somebody who's just new. So it's a really good exercise. And then to create hierarchies, some things you can think of is generic and specific relationships, whole, part, class, instance. You can either start from the bottom and then move to the top. So start with specific terms and then come up with some general categories for that, or you can start with some general categories and then ask yourself, what are the parts? What are the most specific terms? What are the instances of these categories? Good. This is one example of how to do thesaurus in Excel. All right. Last one, taxonomy. So you might remember the name taxonomy from your biology classes. Basically, what a taxonomy is a tree of classes and subclasses. It's more formal than a thesaurus. So this is what it might look like. The arrows there mean is a. So the difference between a thesaurus and a taxonomy is as following. Here you can see apple under apple tree in a thesaurus. That's fine because apple is a narrower term than apple trees, right? If you want to find the topic apple, you might want to find it under apple tree. That makes sense, right? But the thing is, it doesn't work in a taxonomy because an apple is not a kind of apple tree. So if you're looking for content about apple, if you're looking for content about apples, it might not be relevant for apple trees. All content about apples is not necessarily also about apple trees. In a taxonomy, you would organize it in the following way. You would have a branch with fruit. Apples and bananas are kinds of fruit. And you would have a branch with trees, where you have apple trees and palm trees, which are kinds of trees. What is it useful for? To refine the results of searching or browsing. You can set up filters. You can also use it to display some related content and to increase the set of results to explode the query. So the computer can infer that if you're looking for things on apple, well, say fruit, it might also give you all the content that's indexed with bananas and apples. Right, this is one example, Dcom, which makes use of this. On the left-hand side, you can see it categorizes its courses with business topics and then skill level business software. So if I'm interested in presentation skills, I can select that under business topics, and then I can select Microsoft under software products because I have a Windows, so I'm not interested in Apple software, for example. That lets you get to the content, to the most relevant content really fast. A lot of e-commerce sites use this principle already. We don't see it very much in software documentation yet. This is one example that I did, and it just went really wrong because the base behind that system is a thesaurus, and I tried to come up with that C also section, and the results were just not that relevant. So if you're going to do something like this, it needs to be a taxonomy. How to do this? Here you can still work with Excel, but that doesn't make that much sense because if you're doing a taxonomy, it means you want to integrate that in some software application at some point. So you might as well go for a database. And there's also some specialized taxonomy management tools. Here my advice would be to get help from somebody who's good at data modeling, so you don't run into problems later on with things that you think make sense, but the computer doesn't. All right, this is one example that I did with our treaty terms again in a spreadsheet, so it's easier to present. And to conclude, I would say that the need for controlled vocabularies is increasing. We used to have software documentation in big, massive PDFs with hundreds of pages. Now the size of these information units, as I call them, information chunks, is going down, and the number is going up, which is, I think it's great. The only thing is context. That context is going down the drain, because you have all these small information units everywhere, and controlled vocabularies is a way to glue these together. So put the context back into your documentation system. If you can't have that context within your massive, huge PDF document, then put it around those information chunks. Right, that's the end of my talk. I hope it's been useful, and I'm sorry about the poor contrast. I hope I can put the slides on the internet so you can have a closer look at them. Thank you very much for your attention.
All right, so now we've got a 20-minute coffee break. You can find Emilie around if you have questions about her talk. Lisa Simpson said that that she had that line about seeing through time, which I like to drink coffee until I can. So join me and let's look at time. Oh,